Hello, everybody. Good evening. With Mr. Jay Kaplan and Mr. Anthony Strait, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz. We're on a few minutes early tonight on Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines, kind of talking about one of the bigger stories of today, and that would be baseball agreeing, although the owners haven't agreed to it yet, they will agree to an expanded playoff system for 2020. Guys, what do we think about this? And going from 10 teams to 16 teams on opening day is kind of unprecedented. But then again, that's 2020 for you.
Rabbi, we talked about stuff, on our baseball preview last week where pretty much everything for this season is unprecedented, new territory. It looks like Major League Baseball is going to utilize this year to, throw everything up on the wall and see what may or may not stick going forward. The commissioner announcing today that they're going to seed teams 1 through 8, the first and second place teams in each division, the 2 remaining teams with the best record. Your first round is going to be seeded kind of like the NBA is, 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, 4-5. First round is best of 3. All 3 played in the higher seeds home stadium, and then you get best of 5 in the next round. And when you get to the conference finals, you got best of 7 before hitting the division, we'll call it the conference finals, whatever. The league championship.
We're in basketball mode right now. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah. League championship series, best of 7. Rabbi, as I said to you when we were chatting about this before the show, I've never been a big fan of best of 3. I think this version of it is a little more palatable. It's an interesting way to do it. I don't know if I'm overwhelmingly in favor of it, but you know what? I understand they kind of want to inject a little more excitement into the season this year and try new things, and this is just the latest one of the new things they're going to try.
For this season, I'm actually in agreement with this because you got to think about it. A lot of teams that would finish second, even the 7th and 8th team in each league, may not even play each other. So you lose a lot of tiebreakers as far as head-to-head matchups, common opponents. So that goes by the wayside. But now you getting the extra teams in. Now it's kind of like, all right, you give teams that probably would have been out of a division race a little something more to play for other than just 1 or 2 wildcard spots. Now it's like kind of finishing second, you guarantee yourself a playoff spot. It's almost like the National Hockey League, where it's like if you play your way into at least the top 3 spots, you're automatically getting a playoff spot. It's just a matter of if you're playing, within your division at that point. But also the seeding, it's straight seeding 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, kind of like it's similar to the NBA. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it. I like the idea of an underdog going into a visitor's ballpark and having to take 2 out of 3 to move on to the next round of playoffs. We see this generally towards the end of the regular season when there's playoff implications on the line and you have to win maybe 1 or 2 games to lock up a playoff spot anyway. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's now a playoff round. And it's not the first time that Major League Baseball has had an experiment with kind of extending a playoff mid-season. Remember 1981, the Strait shortened season, they basically took the division winners from both halves and put them together and made kind of like, which actually was kind of a preview of what would become the division series years later. Right. So it's not the first time that Major League Baseball has done this. But also because it's a 60-game sprint, you only have so many games to play these games in. So many days to play these games in. We're playing 60 games, 67 days, and you're only playing within your division and the corresponding division in the league. So, like I said, it's going to be a lot of first-round matchups that you're going to see that between teams that are not going to actually play each other. Think of it like this. The Houston Nationals caught the biggest break with this because they don't have to play anywhere outside their own division and the National League West, and the only really opponent in the West that's more of a threat is the Dodgers. Maybe the Padres may be a sleeper here. Maybe, but that's good for, say, the Oakland Athletics, or let's say for the Rays, or even the National League East, which is arguably going to be the toughest division of all, when you have 3, maybe 4 teams that could possibly get into the playoffs. And now you have you have basically, 3 extra spots that could come out. You can literally see a division have more than 2 playoff teams getting in.
In theory, yeah. Rabbi?
Yes. So before we move on to the regular show, I don't like it, by the way. I don't like it because I think baseball has this kind of flair to their playoffs because it's hard to get in there. It's only 10 out of 30 teams. And if they did this from 1995 to 2019, 46 teams, 46 at or below 500 would have made the playoffs. We were talking a long time ago on one of our baseball shows when the Cardinals won the World Series with an 83-79 record and then just going through the playoffs like crazy. Again, an average of 2 teams a year would be below 500 and in the postseason. There's only 3 seasons, 2000, 2003, and 2009, where there would have been all winning teams. So I know it's a 60-game sprint, but I was actually really excited to see these races just start right off the bat. And if you have a shit start, guess what? You're not going to make the playoffs. Now it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So release the Kraken. Welcome to On the Sports Lines in the NBA Bubble Preview 2020. Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait are with me. This is a truly unprecedented time in all sports. The 4 major sports will pick up in one way or another, starting with baseball tonight, over the next 10 days. Last week we talked MLB. Next week we'll talk NHL and NFL. Get excited, kids. But tonight we talk all about the National Basketball Association. They'll get their season started a week from today. Let's start tonight's festivities with our opener focusing on the NBA bubble. Unlike baseball, basketball has decided to play the rest of their season all in one location. Disney's Wide World of Sports, in Orlando, Florida. The NBA made sure that all players, owners, trainers, media, and maybe even a few mascots stay within the confines of the bubble, making sure players are safe and ultimately immune from COVID-19, whose epicenter now lies in the state where the players are residing. The NBA has the unusual challenge of keeping players safe and, keeping players happy. Outside of a few social media leaks of airline quality food, the Spirit Airlines quality food that was around that first week, and people getting told on by others, I think Dwight Howard's been involved in almost every single one of those paddles. This experiment has been a success so far. How will the bubble survive until the NBA actually wants it? And that's mid-October. The 2020 NBA champ will finally be crowned. Let's give the first word to Jay.
Yeah, Rabbi, we've kind of gone back and forth about this. We've covered it over a couple of shows leading up to here. And you know what? I got to say, I'm more inclined to believe this can work now than when we first started talking about it. Look, I'm still concerned about what is happening outside the bubble in terms of the crazy increase in COVID-19 cases in Florida, as you mentioned. And part of that is because the Disney workers who are going to be involved in this can come and go as they please from the bubble. And the NBA doesn't have as much control over their comings and goings or their testing, But inside the bubble, things seem to be pretty solid. Dwight Howard's nonsensical comments, which he says were taken out of context aside, look, is the playing field going to be level across the board with all 22 teams in Orlando? No. There are a few teams that are missing players either due to testing positive for COVID before reporting to Orlando, or opting out of playing. You look at the Nuggets, who were one of the worst hit. They could potentially have 9 guys contracting it. They had to shut down their practice facility in Denver before flying to Orlando because of how pervasive that virus was among the team. The Wizards are in a similar situation. Bradley Beal, Davis Bertans electing not to play. A couple of others not with the team as of yet. No explanation as to why. The Kings, another team that has been negatively impacted. But with all that being said, there were 0 positive results from the most recent round of testing by those players already inside the bubble. A couple of players have been re-quarantined due to violating the protocols on leaving the campus. But other than that, the NBA does seem to have done a rather solid job of keeping the bubble clean. Can it stay that way when the players start banging against each other when the actual games start? And later on, when we get to the playoffs and family members are allowed to come into the bubble? All that remains to be seen. But as of this moment in time, right here, right now, I am cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jay. I'm optimistic. I'm a little cautious, though. Think about this. The NBA has spent $170 million on this whole Disney World bubble to work. And you think about it's like, yeah, so far 0 tests, and you worry about players breathing on each other, and obviously the sweat and all that during the games. But of course, if there's no virus in the bubble, it shouldn't make much of a difference. So in theory, it should work. Also, you considering as the playoffs go on and more teams are eliminated, there'll be less and less players and less coaching staff to have to worry about as far as the bubble is concerned. Yeah, the biggest concern is the Disney World staffers themselves because they have to go in and out. Obviously, they have lives, so they have to, obviously they have to tend to that. And also the family members of players when they're allowed to come in. How do you test them regularly, and what happens if a positive test from a relative impacts what's going on inside the bubble? We know we have a couple of players, particularly Zion Williamson, that had to leave the bubble to tend to a family matter, and when he comes back, he has to quarantine. Mm-hmm. So like I said, there's still a lot of questions up in the air. The zero positive test is a good sign, but it's a cautious sign because you think about it, they're still within the epicenter of what is now this pandemic, and like the state of Florida, like right now, is just really.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. It's basically what New York was a few months ago as far as COVID cases. And that's a big concern because you want the player, it's going to be dependent on the players' attitude, their behavior. Like I said, the Dwight Howard notwithstanding, they have a snitch line. They have very, very stringent protocols in place. But it's gonna be on the players themselves as far as being able to behave themselves, mm-hmm. not going off and going rogue and possibly putting not just themselves but their teammates and the coaching staff and even some of the Disney World staffers in serious harm.
Okay, I like how you called it the snitch line, by the way, because that's
exactly what it is. Everybody knows.
I actually think I mentioned it last week. This is probably a better idea than what baseball is doing. Limit travel. Let everybody have their fun. We've seen people shotgun beers, play cornhole, play
go fishing.
Legs, go fishing. Just everything has actually come together. And I think, as I mentioned, the NBA has this weird job of balancing everything. Make your players happy, but make sure everybody is safe. That's kind of what very few leagues have to do. Again, baseball doesn't have to do that, but basketball has a lot of people chirping out there, especially that first week when everybody was complaining about the food. I think I mentioned this last week on the baseball.
And to be fair, Rabbi, it's only the food being served to those in quarantine.
That is true.
If you get out of quarantine, you have access to the usual good food. That is
the usual food, but it's just funny how that started with everything. Also, if people leave the bubble, and we'll talk a little more about this during the show, especially with the Clippers, if you get regular testing, you only have to spend 4 days in quarantine to the maximum, which could be 10 to 14. So that's a big plus out there. They're being strict, but they are giving a little leniency to everything that's going on. I want to see when we have the first small outbreak of cases, whether it be anywhere from like 5 to 10, I want to see what happens then. MLS had a very good situation like this. They're really the first sports league to be in a bubble, and they had the PR nightmare of having to kick out 2 teams because of all of their positive COVID tests. Mm-hmm. However, they're going on as scheduled. They've had no real issues so far. And now we have 24 teams in there, and they're about to play the knockout round starting on Saturday. They're going to most likely get through their tournament. This is a little bit longer, but as Anthony said, people are going to leave the bubble. And once that bubble becomes, I guess, more sparse, or I think that
smaller.
Small, not smaller, but there's going to be more density around there. People are going to be able to be more easily able to social distance. And I think when that happens, I think we'll be fine. I think it's the first 8 games of this reseeding process, plus what we'll see in the first round of the playoffs, that will really make a big difference. All right. So let's move on to our local team in the bubble as we start the show tonight, the Brooklyn Nets. No team, and I don't care what you say, but no team has seemed to have been hit harder from COVID-19 than the team that would normally play at Barclays. Along with the known injuries of free agent pickups, Kevin Durant and Kyrie, they were never coming back. Just letting you know that right now. Never. Spencer Dinwiddie and Taurean Prince are also going to sit out the restart due to COVID, and DeAndre Jordan will sit out, well, because it's God-given American right to do so, apparently. Mm-hmm. Anthony, there are very, very little expectations seemingly on the Nets coming into Orlando. What say you?
You know what? This is going to be an open audition for next season. I mean, look at it like this. Before the shutdown because of the pandemic, the Nets have fired Kenny Atkinson. So you have Jacques Vaughn, who's basically the interim coach. It was the Nets punting on this season anyway. You know, Kyrie Irving goes down. He has surgery on his shoulder. He's done for the year. Kevin Durant was not playing at all. But now you go into this bubble and you lose 5 other players. You literally have 7 guys who are out of the lineup that was supposed to be part of the original 10, 11-man rotation at the start of the season. Either the injury, either COVID-related, or in the case of Wilson Chandler, opted out entirely. The only 2, like you look at it right now, the only 4 players they have is Caris LeVert, Jared Allen, Joe Harris, and Gary Temple, who was on the original roster. They literally have to sign guys off the street to make a roster. They got Jamal Crawford, who did not play in the first scrimmage game. Michael Beasley was signed and then left the bubble because he tested positive for COVID as well.
In the most Michael Beasley thing that could possibly Michael Beasley, by the way.
Yes, by the way. It is typical Michael Beasley, if you all know it, as far as his career over the years. But then you think about this. When I think back to what Kyrie Irving said back in January, remember, December, January, when he talked about how this team needed more to build more blocks to win a championship. You think about, he named himself, Durant, DeAndre Jordan, Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, and Gary Temple. He left out Joe Harris and Jared Allen. Like, he was kind of throwing guys under the bus. So guys like Joe Harris and Jared Allen, this is their way to finally kind of step up and show really why they can be key cards to next season. You think about it, there were 2 key pieces to the Nets making the playoffs last year when they had D'Angelo Russell leading the team rather than Kyrie Irving. But also, a lot of more pressure is going to fall on Caris LeVert because he is literally, I feel like, the third best scorer. And you think about the game he had prior to the shutdown against Boston when he came back from 20 down and he scored 50 points. It's going to be a lot of scoring. It's going to have to come from LeVert. When you look at the first scrimmage game against New Orleans, they looked like a team that needed to wear name tags on the front of their jerseys to figure out who's who. They just look like a team that's going to take a long time to kind of get any kind of chemistry. I don't think they're going to get any chemistry, but for the individuals, it's a good way to show that. It's a good way to show what they're made of. But in Jacques Vaughn's case also as well, it's audition for him because I don't think he's going to be the coach next year for the Brooklyn Nets. It's always talk of maybe Mark Jackson coming in and coaching his team, at least if you believe rumors. But for Jacques Vaughn, it could possibly be a coaching opportunity down the line if something else comes up. If he's able to turn anything into this whole COVID experience into something positive as far as Brooklyn is concerned coming out of this season.
Rabbi, you asked the question in our production meeting about how do we see this bubble run going, and I honestly don't see it going very long. I mean, and you kind of called it. The Nets are essentially a team of replacement-level players. I mean, like you said, we knew Durant wasn't going to be there. Kyrie's out for the season with a right shoulder injury since the 20th of February. No Dinwiddie, Jordan, Prince, Chandler, or even Nick Claxton. All these guys are unavailable for various reasons. And with that goes a large part of the playmaking, rebounding, and scoring. I mean, they got
Just that?
Wait for it. I'm not done yet.
Just that. No, just playmaking and scoring. I mean, you can do other things other than
scoring, rebounding, defense. They got some of the size back with Donta Hall, who's a 6'9" guy who's been supposedly a star in the G League. They brought in, Lance Thomas, who's at 6'8". But, Jacques Vaughn's going to have to play small ball for most of the time. And you talk about Karis LeVert as the lone, returning major offensive option. He was averaging about 17-7 before the stoppage. I mean, he automatically becomes the guy in both scoring and playmaking. Joe Harris will join him on the perimeter, and his ability to continue to knock down threes at a 41% clip are going to be crucial. After that, who knows? Look, the addition of Jamal Crawford, along with Tyler Johnson and Justin Anderson, gives the Nets more shooters, and Crawford can help with the playmaking, as can, Chris Chiozza, who's going to see some decent minutes at point guard, allowing LeVert to move off the ball. Jared Allen, as you said, is still there. With Jordan out, he should get his starting center job back, but he's really the lone true big on the roster. Crawford does give the Nets something they've been missing all year, which is a reliable scorer off the bench, and his game is well-suited for Vaughn's up-tempo, push-the-pace style. If you look at that 99-68 loss to the Pelicans in their first scrimmage, exhibition game, whatever you want to call it, it wasn't the greatest display of basketball by the Nets. They shot 35% from the floor, 25% beyond the arc. They only made 12 trips to the line, though they did hit 10, and they committed 21 turnovers. To be fair, though, Crawford, Anderson, and Harrison Johnson were all DNPs, so we didn't really get to see how the team might do with the entire rotation at Vaughn's disposal. Look, I think they're going to be outmatched against the top teams, but they could be fun to watch. Could they fall to the 8th seed and wind up having to play the Wizards in a play-in game? Sure. Could they stay as they are? Sure. At the end of the day, though, whether they stay as the 7th seed or fall to the 8th, if they make the playoffs, I can't see them giving either the 1-seeded Bucks or the 2-seeded Raptors much trouble in the first round.
I can't see this team getting anywhere near – I can't even see this team staying in 7th. I think the Magic actually kept their entire team going into Orlando's bubble. So, ironically enough, an Orlando team going into Orlando. They'll play Orlando in the first game next Friday. So, it basically comes down to there's no part of me whatsoever. Even though Jay had this, sunny disposition thinking they could be a fun team, they're not going to be a fun team. Not in any way, shape, or form. And I think we already knew this was going to be one of those seasons that was going to be a growing pains year. But we kind of thought maybe it would be as a 5 seed or even as the 6 seed as they were the year before. But again, somebody has to be the 8 seed. Someone still has to play the Greek Freak and boys in round 1. And again, they don't get buys. That's what I've heard. The Washington Wizards, though, are in worse shape. We mentioned this at the top of the show. Bradley Beal has a shoulder injury. Davis Bertans decided, he's good. I'm leaving. I'm not coming in. And you've lost 46 points per game and 9 rebounds. So this is now Rui Hachimura's team. That's right. Rui Hachimura's team. All the Wizards need to do is shave 2 games off of the, I believe, 6 games that they're back at the Nets. And we can have, my friends, the world's most pathetic playoff. The Wizards and the Nets 3 weekends from now, where the Wizards will need to win 2 games before the Nets need to win 1. I think the Nets' job should be to get the hell out of the bubble as quickly as possibly can. I think the Nets and the Wizards both want to say, why did you put us in the bubble? We don't need the extra experience. We just want to leave and think about 2021. It's Tankapalooza 2020, and I'm very excited to see if the Nets or the Wizards will actually win. Oh my God, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? I talked about this, and I said, how is it that the Knicks, who are so god-awful, get the luck of the draw and not have to be in a bubble right now? Like, they can literally just move on to going about their business.
Look at the Warriors. They get to actually relax and really reload for 2021. Steph Curry is putting his feet up right now. It's like, nope, no second bubble. Thank you very much. We're all good.
You can leave us as the delete 8. We're fine with that.
Yeah, that's. And again, when you have to see Chris Chiozza and somebody by the name of Lance Thomas in any starting lineup in 2020, you know it's going to suck. We like the Brooklyn Nets. We like their foundation. But this is the worst possible scenario that they could be in. It's going to be a very, 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 very bumpy ride on the bubble. And I think even though it's just 2 weeks, And again, it could be like 3 or 4 if they end up playing the Milwaukee Bucks in the best-of-7 series. This is going to be the longest month I think the Nets have ever had.
Quite possibly.
There's my rosy prediction for the Brooklyn Nets right here.
Your rose has a crap ton of thorns, Rabbi.
Damn right it does. But let's actually preview the teams that have a chance to win the championship. We'll start with the teams in the Eastern Conference. As we mentioned, 9 teams currently stand at a staggering 53-12. Milwaukee comes into Orlando as the overwhelming favorite to be the East rep in the NBA Finals. However, the team that beat them to get there almost 14 months ago, Toronto, is 46-18 and is proving that you can have a life without Kawhi Leonard. Add to that the talent of Boston, the talent of Philly, the talent of Miami, and this conference might be up for grabs. However, Anthony is going to tell us why Milwaukee is the overlords and rules us all.
Well, to quote the late great Monster Man Randy Savage, they are the cream of the crop. I mean, when you have the possible 2-time MVP and Giannis Antetokounmpo leading the way, I mean, you're going to win a lot of games. I mean, you think about it. They had literally lost 6 or 7 games prior to the suspension. It was still on pace to win 67 games. That's just how good Milwaukee was this season. Antetokounmpo's numbers is going up the last 3 seasons. It's actually better than this year. He's averaging 29 points a game to go with just under 6 assists. I mean, I don't know how you could possibly get any better. Oh, yeah, by the way, he's added a jump shot, which is something that was literally non-existent last year. But then you think about they have Chris Middleton, who is also an all-star, Wesley Matthews, Kyle Korver. George Hill has filled him admirably well after they lost Malcolm Brogdon last summer in the offseason. They're going to get Eric Bledsoe and Pat Covington back, who both tested positive for COVID, but should rejoin the team at some point. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They're the top scoring team in the league. They're one of the top defensive teams and rebounding teams in the league. And also, they are led by, like I said, the Greek Freak. I mean, they right now, when you look at the way things are playing out for Milwaukee, the only real test that they should have is the conference final. And at this point, we don't know. It could be a wild card. It could be Toronto. It could be a sleeper team in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, the Eastern Conference outside of Milwaukee is a little wide open. Of course, you and Jay will go into that a little further. But Milwaukee all season long, I mean, they have lived up to the expectations that that every prognosticator has played out for them. And then you look at Antetokounmpo taking his game to another level, and possibly lying about having access to a basketball hoop during the quarantine.
No, he definitely lied. He definitely lied. He said he lied.
It was a ruse all along. So I think it's honestly, like I'm saying, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Bucks can do. They're gonna have a full staff once Bledsoe and Covington rejoins the team. They're definitely the prime pick in the Eastern Conference.
You know, I mean, you have the best player in the game right now. I mean, he is an insane combination of athleticism and talent. What he has been able to do the last couple of years has been flat out amazing. And if there is, you know, a team that is led by a one-man gang, you know, granted, he has excellent supporting players, and they are firmly in, they're basically locked in. I don't see a way they lose the 1 seed. So even if Connaughton and Bledsoe don't get back until, you know, closer to the playoffs, I honestly think that the Bucks can coast through these 8 seeding games, and it's not going to make one bit of difference no matter what. That's what I would do. Take it easy. Don't overplay anybody. Don't overstress anybody. I mean, ideally, you want to win a couple of these games just, you know, to keep, you know, the rest of the Eastern Conference on your, you know, far enough back of your heels. But, I mean, to me, this is a cruise control 8 games for them, but, you know, before the playoffs, probably.
It's not only a cruise control 8 games for them, I think, and they're 6.5 up on Toronto. Giannis shouldn't even see the court, I think, for at least 2 or 3 of these games. if he has any slight injury. They did lose 4 games in March, so they probably needed a little bit of a restart going in. They started losing some games against a few better teams. My problem with Milwaukee is they're going to get the Nets, Magic, or Wizards in the first round. They're going to, if the way the playoffs is standing, the way it's going, they're going to get the winner of Miami, Indiana in the second round, and they match up well against both teams, especially with no home court advantage. You're pretty much not even really needing to put your best effort out there until the conference finals. We kind of saw that last year and Milwaukee won the first 2 games pretty easily, and then Toronto wins the next 4, and all of a sudden Milwaukee is out. If Milwaukee has a bad stretch like that again, and they're prone to it at times, this is going to be a very interesting Eastern Conference. I think there are 4 teams that have a legitimate shot. We'll get into that in just a minute. The team who is second in the Eastern Conference and are, believe it or not, the defending champions from like 500 years ago are the Toronto Raptors. What do you think about Nick Nurse's boys, Jay?
I got to say, Rabbi, the defending champs start to restart firmly in the East number 2 seed. As you said, they're 6.5 behind the Bucks. They're 3 up on Boston. I actually think the fact that the Raptors are a defense-first team actually helps them, as they don't have to worry about shooters being off their game or guys getting back into scheme and flow on offense, as the rest of the teams will, in order to get themselves back up to their, pre-stoppage level of play. They're the NBA's number 2 defense. Only the Bucks are better in defensive efficiency, and that's predicated on an even split between transition D, where they allow the fewest amount of points per possession, and half-court D, where they're number 2 in points allowed per possession. You couple that with their ability to force turnovers at the second highest rate in the NBA and hold teams to the 3rd lowest effective field goal percentage, and you got a team that can clamp down on others and get wins dirty and grinding out on defense without having to worry about, having to drop 120 points in a game. They start 5 guys who are borderline all defense. It starts with Pascal Siakam. He's one of the most valuable zone and trapping defenders in the league, due to his speed and wingspan. You got Marc Gasol, who, while he's missed a lot of time due to injury, but the guy proves every night, and especially in the playoffs, just how much of a defensive genius he is. OJ Anunoby is back and healthy finally, and is, the Raptors' designated wing stopper, which was expected of him. The fact that they didn't need him last year is proof of just how deep the team was. Fred VanVleet at 1 guard spot, who leads the league in deflections and constantly defends well above his 6'2" frame. Kyle Lowry at the point, who's tied for the lead in drawn charges with 30 and also defends well above his 6-foot size. Look, Toronto's only 5-11 against the NBA's top teams, but their defensive rating is number 6 against that group. The top 5 offenses in the NBA have a collective 114 offensive rating, but against the Raptors, it's only 108. In fact, every team in the NBA sees their offensive rating drop by at least 4 points when they play the Raptors. Do they struggle on offense a little bit? Yeah, look, they got a nice big 3. Siakam's averaging a little under 24, Lowry a little under 20, and VanVleet is shading under 18 a game. But they're all somewhat high-volume scorers, each needing at least 14 field goal attempts per game. Siakam leads the way with 19. Those 3 guys play at least 35.5 minutes per game. So, the reliance on them to do the bulk of the scoring is huge. There's a big gap between them and the rest of the team. Anunoby, Norman Powell, Serge Ibaka. Look, they're capable of scoring and capable 3-point shooters, but they're strictly complementary players. Toronto's 14th in offensive rating, 13th in pace, 23rd in offensive rebounding, but they're number 3 in points in per transition opportunity, which is due to them being number 1 in the NBA in percentage of possessions finished in transition, which means they get out and run more than anybody in the NBA. And it's why a major part of Nick Nurse's defensive philosophy is to use his team's length and the speed of his personnel to create turnover and transition opportunities. Toronto's going to try and offset their struggles in the half court by getting out in transition as much as possible. Now, if they can continue to hold up on the defensive end, shutting down the opposing team's best player and forcing turnovers to fuel their offense, even against the highest scoring teams in the NBA, then I give them a reasonably good chance of defending their title, guys.
Yeah, you think about this. You think about how good they was last year without Kawhi Leonard in the lineup. They were well over 500 when Kawhi sat, and we know he was on load management for most of the regular season. You talk about this year, they're one of the best defensive teams in the league, and that's only because you watch them defensively, they mix it up between man-to-man and zone. They're one of those teams who are not afraid to go into a box zone and force teams to shoot from outside. And when teams do shoot from outside, there are a lot of contested shots. We saw that in the finals against Golden State, and how that created a lot of problems with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson has the series wore on. But then you think about Fred VanVleet, who become one of my favorite players. He's not afraid of the moment. Like you see how big he plays in road games. Now you're talking about a situation where there is no such thing as home court advantage because everyone is in the same playing field. And by the way, we didn't mention this part we were talking about before the show. A lot of these games feel like you're watching a glorified AAU scrimmage, like the summer league, but the star players are actually playing this time. But Toronto, being a defensive first team, really does help them a lot because they do struggle offensively. But we saw them last in the playoffs. They can win low-scoring games. If you can score 93 points, it doesn't really matter if you can hold the other team to 90. And Toronto's very capable of doing that. But they match up well against Milwaukee defensively because you look at how Milwaukee loves to spread the ball around. They're very dependent on Otsl getting into the paint and that kind of spreading out the defense. But if he can't get into the paint, because guess what, Toronto's playing zone. We saw that in the conference finals last year, whereas they almost dared him to shoot from outside and he couldn't do it. That clamped down the rest of the outside shooters. Middleton and those other guys could not get any outside looks. And also you have Ibaka and Owen Powell who can rebound off the bench and provide some more defense. And in Ibaka's case, he can give you a good 10 to 15 points a game on a given night. So Toronto is probably one of the more dark horse teams, but they're the defending champs, and that's only because they don't have Kawhi Leonard, but they're still an equally good team. Like I think a lot of people just saw Toronto has an also-ran, and Nick Nurse has been a tremendous coach last couple of years because he's coached the philosophy, not necessarily star players. He's coached a motto, a mentality, and that shows with the players. I mean, Kyle Lowry is literally under 6'5", and he leads the league in offensive fouls drawn. That says a lot about this team willing to put their bodies on the line in order to play defense. You don't see that with too many teams, particularly in today's NBA.
Well, I think you saw it in the conference finals last year. In the NBA finals last year, Kyle Lowry, along with leading the team in assists and one of the best assist men in the NBA, is a goddamn pest. Everybody, he just you cannot get away from him. No. He kind of leads into you, and that's kind of one of the reasons why Lowry is as dangerous of a player as he is. Raptors are the only team, not only in the Eastern Conference, but of the 16 teams that would qualify for the playoffs right now, who have a different leader in 5 different stat totals. Siakam has points, Serge Ibaka has rebounds, Lowry has assists, VanVleet has steals, and Chris Boucher has blocks. Siakam is the key. I think if he can be a 25 point per game guy in the postseason and can go up to 8 or 9 rebounds, I don't think he can be a double-double guy. No. He can really, really be the star who can kind of come close to matching Giannis's numbers. The key to the Raptors, again, is their offense. When Toronto shoots 44% from the field this season, that number that they have is 36-4. In the games they don't hit that mark, the number is 10 or 14. And in Nurse's 2 seasons, including the playoffs, if they shoot 48% or better, the Raptors are 65-6, and 4 of those 6 losses were 2 points or less. If the Raptors score, I don't think it's a common thing, but I don't think it's not a big thing to note it. But if the Raptors can actually shoot, they win ball games, which is one of the reasons why they are a huge factor and easily probably the second best team that can knock off the Bucks. Now, I
think the only reason that they're, I guess, given a little lack of respect is because Kawhi Leonard's not there anymore. But
they have no star. Siakam really isn't really as an upper echelon star right now.
They don't have a tier 1 guy, alpha male type guy anymore with Kawhi Leonard gone. on. And that kind of has people looking at them like, but you know what? Don't sleep on them. Just don't.
No, I think they'll probably get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, but then again, I'm about to contradict myself and just talk about 3 teams that will actually have a chance to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and possibly win the East. Let's start with the Heat. They're going to probably be the 4th seed. They may drop down to the 5. I doubt that. They grabbed Jimmy Butler about a year ago now, and at times that 76er was the best player on the court for both teams in that epic 7-game series last year against the Raptors. Butler was a 26-6 guy in the regular season, and one would have to assume he's going to have to be 25 points per game and step it up a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
The difference for Butler this season is he has people to complement him. Bam Adebayo is an all-star and averaging a triple-double this year. I don't think anyone expected that. And Goran Dragic is a basic 6th man of the year candidate. He has 16 points per game off of the bench. And Eric Spoelstra knows how to win championships. He did it in 2 different incarnations. He did it with 2 different incarnations. So he has a chance to bring this team back to the promised land a little bit with Jimmy Butler. Then, Jay, we get to your 76ers, a team that won 10 games away from home in the regular season. I'm hoping that 76er magic comes when they see that their name on the flashing lights of that little AAU area, and they see their name on the court themselves.
Most ridiculous home road splits of any team in the NBA. It's crazy.
29-2 at home, 2 losses at home, which is ridiculous. So they're experimenting with Ben Simmons sliding to the 4 and Shake Milton moving into the point guard role for start. The starting 5 that they're going to probably have out there in Orlando, Milton, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Simmons, and Joel Embiid have not played 1 minute together this season. And I think for a team that's currently 6th right now in the Eastern Conference, you might as well blow it up and try it again. After 8 seeding games, they're going to be asked to play important minutes together against quality teams. I think they kind of maybe want to stay in the 6 and try to get themselves with a possible matchup with the Celtics or the Raptors in round 1, and then kind of avoid the Bucks until the conference finals. I don't know what you're going to see from this team. They have a tremendous upside. That upside can easily be coming out of the East. A lot of people thought about that a season and a half ago. Brett Brown is probably the guy with the most fire under his butt right now, because if he doesn't get the same success that he got last year, he's out. Then we go to the Celtics, who with the post-Kyrie era will be able to use Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown a little bit more than they did in the last postseason when they got destroyed by Milwaukee after Paul Pierce said that the series was over after 1 game. You'll have a fully ready Gordon Hayward to go in this bubble as well, but it's the man who has become the true leader of this team, UConn's own baby, Kemba Walker, who will make this team run. Walker has been out for 14 games this season for the Celtics, which is a little bit of an issue. He only missed 4 games in the previous 4 years, and Coach Brad Stevens has said that Walker still has knee pain as of now. But if a team of role players, I mean burgeoning superstars, who came within 1 game of the NBA Finals without Kyrie Irving in 2018 can have this run again, they will be ready-made to have a deep run. But Kemba can be a 25-point-per-game starter and can be the person that we saw in January. And before that, you have a definite contender for the number 2 spot and a team with nothing to lose that can give Milwaukee a run. Jay, 76ers talk possibly, sir?
Look, here's the thing. The reason Shake Milton is going to get the nod at the nominal point guard spot is because in the last 8 games or so before we went to stoppage, he was averaging 17 points a game and shooting a ridiculous 58% from downtown. I don't know. I don't think those numbers are sustainable. Ben Simmons is back, and just because with this starting 5 on the floor, he's listed as the power forward, don't expect that means that the ball's going to be out of Simmons' hands in terms of running the offense. Milton just gives them another option who is not necessarily in terms of how he will mesh with the starting 5, but how he will mesh with the Joel Embiid plus 3 reserves unit when they start staggering and starting the substitution rotation. Once that happens, you're not going to see Simmons and Milton on the floor together probably until the opening minutes of the second half and maybe the closing minutes of the fourth quarter. Simmons is going to be in a lineup that has him, Richardson, Tobias Harris, and you're going to have Al Horford in the game. Those units probably are where you're going to see the best utilization of these matchups.
And the best utilization of Horford, may I add, because Horford struggled a little bit coming to the Sixers this season.
Yes. I mean, we talked about this when we were doing our actual NBA preview at the, back in the fall. And the concern is can Horford and Embiid play together on the floor, especially when you add in a third guy like Simmons, who is not noted as a shooter. Those lineups struggled. Horford played better coming off the bench. I think he will fare better in the lineups where he's not playing with Embiid. But it's a question of, can Milton come even closest to that level of play once you start hitting the playoffs? It's a lot to ask of a 23-year-old kid who does not have a lot of NBA minutes under his belt, definitely not much in the way of NBA playoff minutes. Ben Simmons is back. He's healthy. Is he going to take a damn jump shot?
No.
Look, I think I do agree with you, Rabbi. I think they have to at least get as far as they got last year for Brett Brown to keep his job. But I think this team goes as far as Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid can take them. Do they have enough surrounding them to get them to the conference finals? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting experiment. But I'm cautiously optimistic that they have finally found a starting five that may actually work together. Remains to be seen.
If this is a team that has clearly, you can argue, underachieved as far as expectations, it would be the 76ers. I mean, you think about it, a lot of their issues has been shooting and spacing. It just seems like no matter what lineup they put out there, they just don't have enough of it. They don't have enough outside shooting. When Embiid and Al Horford are on the court together, it seems like they're the same player. They're getting each other's way.
Why Brown's not going to let them play together?
Yeah, like Joel Embiid is a guy who just does not like to play down in the box for big. He likes to hang out outside the perimeter, takes those three-pointers.
Actually, he doesn't. He prefers to play on the box or run dribble handoffs and pick and rolls, and that's why Milton's going to be playing with him, because he doesn't want to have to step outside because there's too many other guys who can't step outside.
Yeah, and you have a star player, Ben Simmons, who reluctantly doesn't want to shoot, which is, at this point, if you can play defense off him 30 feet away, you're going to do it.
Which is why they're going to try and utilize him as the roll man in pick and rolls, because they feel that's the only other way to get him involved in the offense as an off-the-ball player, because positioning him down in the dunker spot obviously has not worked because it gets in the way of Embiid and screws up the spacing. So we'll see. Brett Brown is not regularly a big fan of the pick and roll, but I think with the guys that he has to work with now, he's going to have to utilize it a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the three teams that aforementioned. Brett Brown's going to have to go on a Jeff Van Gundy 1999 Nick-like run to save his job at this point. Eric Spoelstra, you know what? He doesn't get enough credit for how well of a coach he is because he coached Miami's Big Three, but he's been one of the better coaches for the last decade in the NBA. And clearly, he knows what to get out of this Miami Heat team. The question with Miami is going to be, if they run into Milwaukee, outside Jimmy Butler, can they generate enough offense? They have really struggled against some of the lesser teams in the league. They actually struggled against Brooklyn, who are not a great defensive team this season compared to last year. So that's a question mark with them. And with Boston, it's going to be Kemba Walker's health. The knee, can it hold up? You got Jason Tatum, you got Jaylen Brown, and Gordon Hayward actually playing well. But Kemba Walker's been the reason why what looks like the same Celtics team minus Kyrie Irving gelled together this year and played more like the team we thought they were going to be a season ago with Kyrie Irving. It's just Kemba Walker is notably a different player, and the fact that this is the first real winning team he's been on in his whole career. You think about it, in Charlotte, he was kind of the guy that had to carry the entire load, win or lose. where now Boston he will willing to defer to Tatum or Jaylen Brown when they have a hot night. But can this knee hold up? Going into these 8 games and into the playoffs, because if he's at 100%, that's a huge blow to the Boston Celtics chances. And I like, and if they can fall into that 3 seed, I really like Boston maybe being one of those teams that get into the conference finals. But don't sleep on Indiana too, because they got Victor Oladipo back.
Yeah.
And he's healthy. So we'll see what Indiana could do. And Nate McMillan's definitely been one of the best coaches in the league. But just because of what he's been able to do with an undermanned Indiana Pacers team the last 2 seasons, now you got a healthy Victor Oladipo. We'll see.
Who knows what Victor Oladipo wants to do right now, though? He's been like, I want to play in the bubble. I don't want to play in the bubble. Oh, cool. The bubble seems really good. So I think Indiana will be fine. Miami is not a good matchup for them. And Indiana, is, for some reason, has kind of not been 100% going into the playoffs. I don't see this as any different. We shall see.
Rabbi,
well, maybe Victor.
The East is pretty much like this. You have Milwaukee and Toronto up here. You got the 3, 4, 5, and 6 teams stacked here, and they're all pretty much like this, and then the 7th and 8th seeds. I don't know that anybody who comes out of the middle of that pact is good enough to beat potentially both the Raptors and Milwaukee in order to get to the NBA Finals.
I like Toronto a lot, but I think and it's funny because Toronto is going to be fully healthy coming into the bubble. For some reason, I just feel like when we see this happen for teams who miss a part and then do really well, they kind of suck when they come all together. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen to Toronto. We'll see. Again, as y'all know, I'm very skeptic of almost anything, but I really do think it's going to be very interesting. But watch out for Boston. Watch out for Boston. This is the same nucleus that almost got to the NBA Finals in 2018. Just saying. Now to the West, where it begins with La La Land. Horrible movie, by the way. As the Lakers, number 1 Lakers and number 2 Clippers are the only 2 organizations in the West with 20 losses or less. Too bad the one year that they may actually play in a playoff series where they will just awkwardly play at Staples for 7 games, where the Lakers will always have home court advantage. They play it in Orlando where nobody has home court advantage. Kind of ironic. The Nuggets, Rockets, and Jazz might have a thing or say to do about the possibility of true West Coast bias in the bubble. Let's start with LeBron, AD, and the LeBronettes, Jay.
I think the Lakers are in the best restart position of any of the teams. They're the second best record in the league. They're 5.5 games up on the Clippers in the West. They have 2 of the top tier players in the NBA. Those guys are healthy and ready to pick up right where they left off. I mean, LeBron James and Anthony Davis were both having MVP level seasons before the stoppage, despite not really knowing who else was going to show up on any given night for that team once you get past those 2 guys. AD was averaging almost 27 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, and over 2 blocks. LeBron was averaging a little under 26 points, almost 8 rebounds, and 10.6 assists. A better twosome in the NBA this season would be tough to find. Look, but as I said, it's, who's the number 3 guy? That's where things get a little uncertain for this team. Rajon Rondo and Avery Bradley were big parts of the rotation, but both are out for the foreseeable future. Rondo's injured. Bradley opted out. Rondo was provided some good playmaking for the second unit. Bradley gave them some toughness and defense. The prevailing opinion, guys, starting with veteran Laker forward Jared Dudley, is that Kyle Kuzma is the guy most likely to step up. Dudley's been very high on Kuzma's play since they've come to the bubble, and he sees that leading to a larger role. Kuzma's the only other Laker averaging double figures and scoring at 12.5 a game, leading the second unit. And Dudley's been impressing upon Kuzma that it's not always about the number of buckets. Can you get 3 or 4 offensive rebounds? Can you get a couple of assists? Can you get to the line when your shot's not falling? Can you lock down power forwards so that AD can play the 5? Otherwise, you're looking for a guy like Alex Caruso to continue to step up. I mean, he was making big strides before the stoppage. Or new additions like Dion Waiters or J.R. Smith, both of whom will show they can score the ball on any given night, but both come with plenty of baggage. Markieff Morris is back, which could be big in terms of both depth and versatility in the front court. And Danny Green has shown that he can hit big shots over the course of his career. Another big question that needs answering is who's going to be the closing 5? James, Davis, Danny Green, Contavious Caldwell-Pope are the likely first four. That fifth spot's up in the air. Does Frank Vogel go big with Dwight Howard or JaVale McGee? Does he go small with Caruso, who gives them ball handling on defense and is no stranger to playing those final 5 minutes with James, AD, and company? Do you trust Dion Waiters and his propensity to shot hunt in the final 5 minutes of a tight game? Or does Kuzma's performance in practice continue into games and he earns that fifth spot? These 8 seeding games starting next week is more about them finding their groove again going into the playoffs and avoiding injury. They can regain the chemistry they had, before the stoppage while incorporating Waiters and Smith into the rotation. They're going to be a very tough out in the Western Conference playoffs, guys.
You know what? When I look at the Los Angeles Lakers, they remind me of the 2002 New Jersey Nets, and that was led by Jason Kidd and Byron Scott. Hear me out now. They were one of the fun teams to watch offensively, but they were really big on defense. A lot of the highlight reel dunks and fast break points led by Jason Kidd was predicated because they played stout defense. The Lakers are the top defensive team in the league and lead the league in blocks and rim protection. And that plays a big role in the playoffs, even on a tough shooting night. And coincidentally enough, Jason Kidd is on the Lakers coaching staff. So I guess that's why I tied the two together.
Looking at Frank Vogel being like, when is it my turn? When is it my turn?
But you mentioned LeBron James and Anthony Davis has gelled very well playing off each other this season. LeBron James it's always kind of embraced more of the Magic Johnson role with his second year of the Lakers than any Michael Jordan comparison that defined people at the world while he was in sports just left a throw on him. But Anthony Davis has shown how his potential when he doesn't have to carry the load all by himself. We saw that in New Orleans when he was basically the guy that had to do it all. Now he gets easier shots with LeBron James on the court. The question is going to be, what does the offense do when LeBron James sits for maybe 5 or 10 minutes? That offense tends to get really stagnant, even when Anthony Davis is on the court, because it's now, okay, how do you get the ball to Anthony Davis to get him easier shots? Can he draw double teams enough to get those outside shooters open looks? They added Dion Waiters and, of course, J.R. Smith. Look, J.R. Smith is a bit of an enigma for what it's worth. But on a given night, on a given night, he is a walking bucket waiting to happen. He will explode for 15, 20 points without knowing it. And you think about eventually they'll get Rajon Rondo back at some point. Avery Bradley is a big loss. Him opting out of the restart because of his contributions on the defensive end. And we obviously saw that he kicked in some great outside shooting, particularly when they played the Clippers in that final Sunday prior to the suspension of the season. But the Lakers right now, they're, of all the teams in the Western Conference, they're in the best shape to kind of pick up where they left off because they're in a great position to kind of lock up that number 1 seed and be able to rest guys in the final couple of games, which is key for LeBron and Anthony Davis, who are a little older on the roster. And it's a slightly older roster than the previous few years. But Kyle Kuzma is going to have to step up and be that third guy. I mean, he's going to have to be the Kyle Kuzma you saw from 2 seasons ago when he was arguably the Lakers' best rookie. For the Lakers to really come out of a tough Western Conference and maybe get to the finals.
Hello? Yeah, JR? Yeah, I'll send down 10 more pairs immediately over to the bubble. I don't know why you only have 10 in there, but I will send down 10 more pairs immediately. Make sure you don't step out, all right? Thank you. Bye. Okay, now let's move on. Let's talk about Dion Waiters. First of all, James and that bit was funny. I couldn't even get my tracking. James and Davis both scored 12 tonight in their first scrimmage in just 15 minutes. They look like nothing has changed for them. And Waiters scored 9. I actually think Dion Waiters is going to do a good job ball handling when James is obviously not ball handling in like the 10, 15 minutes that he doesn't ball handle. And Waiters will just make a ridiculous shot like Dion Waiters usually does. But I think this team is going to be fine. They'll get Rondo back, I think, sometime between the first and second round. The one thing I worry about the Lakers is their path. The Lakers will probably see a team like Memphis has given them a little bit of trouble this year. That might be the ideal matchup. If they get Portland, though, Damian Lillard has torched them this season, and they've played very close games. In fact, on the first game back from Kobe passing away in January, Lillard went for 40 or 45. I'm not sure, but he basically won the game for Portland right on his back. Then if Houston gets up to that 4 or 5, you have Houston in round 2 and the Clippers in round 3. That is like a murderer's row right there. I think you want to see a team maybe more the likes of Memphis, maybe even, God forbid, if New Orleans gets into that spot, you might want to see them in that 8 seed. And then you kind of maybe want to see a Utah in round 2, although I'll talk them up in a little bit. You're going to see the Clippers eventually. I think we're heading towards LA in the conference finals, but who knows? Anthony, other LA and Boardman. Let's talk about them.
You know what? The Los Angeles Clippers, before the suspension of the season, they were 44-20, 5.5 games behind the Lakers. If there was any team that I felt like got hurt with the suspension of the season, was the Los Angeles Clippers. You got to think about this. At the beginning of the season, Paul George missed the first 11 games. Then Kawhi Leonard didn't play back-to-back games. He was on load management. Then they started to add pieces. Patrick Beverley missed time. They started adding pieces literally as the season went along. It showed how viable Lou Williams is off the bench because they won a lot of games because of Lou Williams. Even though he's not being paid superstar money, he's definitely been a star for that team. The chemistry of this team is a big concern for me because Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, even in the games where they play together, really don't look like they've been able to mesh as quickly as LeBron James and Anthony Davis has. And I don't know because they're both perimeter guys who are ball dominant. You got to understand Kawhi Leonard takes a lot of shots. Paul George takes a lot of shots also. They're volume shooters. And then you add into the fact that they added Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson during the midseason. That the suspension of the season hit literally has to finally starting to kind of pick things up and starting to gel. And now they have to wait 4 months later and now have to try to rekindle that chemistry that wasn't really there. You think about this, the Clippers, they played up to the best opponents. Like they took 2 out of 3 from the Lakers at the beginning during the season, but they've had games where they played terrible, particularly against Memphis when they got blown out at home and January is literally booed off their own court. So they can play up to the opponents and down to the opponent on a given night. Now we fast forward to the restarting the bubble. They just got Marcus Morris back into the bubble. He just joined the team. Zubac has not joined the team as of yet, from what I know. Montrezl Harrell has left the bubble to deal with deal with his family. They only have Joakim Noah has the only big on the team as a 5. He started in a scrimmage yesterday, and he basically was another guy that they basically signed during the All-Star break and prior to the suspension of the season. It's going to be a question mark as to how quickly can all these guys get on the same page, because they really have not played a lot of games together. And when they finally did, and they started to kind of win 10 of the next 12 games and kind of close the gap on the Lakers, the season was suspended. Now you have to pick all that back up again. It's going to be interesting to see what Doc Rivers can do as far as trying to get all these guys back on the same page again, but also the 2 superstars in itself, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. You think about the game they lost to the Lakers, Paul George was the guy that was kind of really leading the Clippers in that game, but they went away from him and tried to force feed Kawhi Leonard. They got to figure out some kind of a balance, because when the Clippers have played well, it's because both guys have played well equally. But when they're trying to force feed one or the other, it's shown their weaknesses in some of these games. And it's going to be, like I said, the chemistry, can they bring it all together with all these interchangeable pieces kind of going as they come along? It's going to be the big question mark. And the way they mash up, I felt like a team like Dallas could give them a hard time in round 1. Memphis has always blown them out. Heaven forbid Portland gets hot and get into that 7th spot. What kind of they don't play enough defense to stop anyone else like John Morant. You really think you're going to stop Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum if they both get hot on a given night? So there's a lot of question marks for a team that everyone was kind of penciling in as the NBA champions this season. And the restart just kind of added more questions to this team.
Yeah, I mean, and if you'll remember back on our, when we were talking our original NBA preview back in the fall, we were talking a lot about how the Clippers, on paper, when you paired Kawhi Leonard with Paul George, with the likes of Harrell, with the likes of Patrick Beverley and the other guys that were surrounding them, that they on paper looked to be the best team at least in the West. The one thing that was concerning, we said, can Kawhi hold the team together until George gets back? And then how long will it take for those two guys to mesh and figure out how to play together? The issue with those two is that they have very similar offensive styles. Yes, it means either one of them can carry the team on any given night. And on the flip side, either one of those guys can guard anybody on any given night. But when your two best players don't have complementary styles like LeBron and AD do on the other side of LA, it can cause some chemistry issues. And you're right, Ant, these guys were just starting to figure it out. And now they got to start from scratch, and they're not completely whole. So that also is going to cause a problem. I think the Clippers will need these 8 games to get them to try and figure themselves out so that they are, in their best position and at their correct level heading into the playoffs. But I think it bears watching how they play in these 8 games to see, are they all on the same page? Can Kawhi and George, have they figured out how to play together, and are they back in the groove they were just starting to get into? If they are, they're dangerous. And yeah, Rabbi, we could have an all-LA conference finals. If they're not in sync, then they could go out in the first round. You don't know.
I don't think they could go out in the first round. I mean, although it could be Dallas, it could be
Houston.
If it's Houston, then that's a little bit of a problem. It could also be Oklahoma City, and I think that's exactly who they want to play in round 1, although Chris Paul might have something to say about that. The record with George and Leonard is very good, by the way. It's only 6 or 7 losses when they both play in the lineup. I think the one thing that you sort of went around it. No Harrell, big problem. No Beverley, who just left the bubble, big problem. You need those 2 guys specifically. Beverley is the glue of this damn team. And if you don't have that, with all of the issues that this team has had, you're right. They haven't done really well on defense this year, and chemistry-wise, they're still a little slow. I think a lot of people thought that they would be in a better position than they are now, not fighting between 2 and 6. There's only 4 games difference between the 2 seed and the 6 seed. So I don't think the Clippers could fall down that far, but there's a small possibility they can. But I think talent-wise, they're better than the Lakers. I think that's pretty obvious, but you have LeBron and you have AD. That's a championship mentality, especially with LeBron. I think unless Kawhi goes superhuman in the postseason, I don't think the Clippers are an early out, but we might not get LA in the conference finals.
There was a team out west, I think you're going to mention them, that we didn't talk about, the Denver Nuggets. I said if there was a matchup that the Clippers really don't match up well, it's with the Clippers, it's the Nuggets, because the Nuggets have the size and the athleticism to play offense and defense against this Clipper team. And now if you don't have Harrell and Beverley in that mix, you're already having chemistry issues as it is. And you talk about during the season, the grumblings and stuff like that. The Clippers could easily be a team that gets to the conference finals or a team that bows out around 1 or 2.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about the 3 teams who I think have a chance to break down the door. And apologies to Dallas and Oklahoma City. Dallas, I think, is a little too young. Luka and Porzingis' first playoffs. Maybe the bubble will actually take a little bit of pressure off of them, but I don't know if I like their chances. And Oklahoma City has hella overachieved this year. The bubble was the worst thing, I think, to happen to them, but they'll be interesting. But I think the three teams that we need to look at, number one is the Jazz. They're an intriguing team of the restart. They were 41-23 before the interruption to this season, and they have a ton of playoff experience. You see that with the three teams I'm about to mention. You can easily see a team like this make a run to the conference finals, but they have to have the right matchups. They have to have a team like Oklahoma City in round one, and maybe they do have to play the Clippers in round two. However, the absence of Bojan Bogdanovic takes a 40% three-point shooter and a 20-point-per-game scorer off of the table. And, of course, we have to mention, what's the relationship going to be like between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert after the whole Gobert gave Mitchell COVID and Gobert's carelessness kind of almost set off the whole entire sports world? I'm wondering what the chemistry between those two players is going to be on the court. If those questions get answered in the affirmative, this team is dangerous. We'll get to them in a second. The Nuggets have actually been the number 2 team in the West in a lot longer than the Clippers have this season, and they're 1.5 games back of the Clippers now. Visually, the Nuggets are the same team that got within 1 game of the conference finals a year ago. And, of course, they'll bring back Nikola Jokic, who has lost 40 pounds.
And does he look slender?
He does look slender. My goodness, COVID does wonders to you, apparently. Jokic was their leading man with averages of 20.2 points, 10.2 rebounds, and 6.9 assists per game. The Joker was reportedly asymptomatic of COVID with his COVID and has since recovered. Some studies, though, show potential lung and respiratory problems after the infection, but the effect on the virus on Jokic has remained to be seen. Doctors aren't even 100% sure about the virus and its potential effects after infection. Jokic needs to be the man in this playoffs. I don't see, the problem with what you said about the Clippers against the Nuggets is if the role players have a bad night, if Jamal Murray turns the ball over like crazy, they're dead in the water. I think the Nuggets need to be at 100% to beat the Clippers because the Clippers have blown out the Nuggets in a couple of occasions this year. Because when the Clippers are on, the Nuggets can't touch them. And the Nuggets have to be 100% on and hope the Clippers make a ton of mistakes. Then we have the Rockets, who I think are dangerous as hell. They were my pick to come out of the Western Conference in the beginning of this season when we did our NBA preview show back in 2004, apparently. But the struggles of James Harden and Russell Westbrook to play together at times, when one was lighting the world on fire, the other was struggling. You don't get to see Russ and Harden for an 82-game regular season, but I think you're going to see 2 players who have been in a ton of playoffs and have a ton of playoff experience, and Harden really needs to break that label of a playoff choker. Russ finally is in the bubble and should be ready to go for the restart on the 31st. Harden should win the NBA scoring title again at 34 points per game, and Westbrook was going through a stretch of 32 points per game over the last 22 games before the break. They traded away Clint Capella, their starting center, way back at the trade deadline back in 2005, but the Rockets have finally embraced playing small ball. Robert Covington, the 6'7" defensive ace, is the team's tallest starter, and PJ Tucker, who is 6'5", has been playing in the middle. If you thought we would see a 6'5" center in this NBA, well, you're welcome, kids. Russ, Westbrook, and Harden's being superstars with a ton of experience, and the Rockets' own death lineup could finally fulfill the prophecy I gave them back in October, guys.
Rabbi, I think you were spot on in terms of Jokic and company. Those guys have to be almost perfect night in and night out, considering that most of their potential playoff matchups are not good for them. Denver, yeah, spot on. I mean, Mitchell and Gobert have been saying all of the right things that, even if we're not back to being brothers, we're okay as teammates. That part of it's all good. We can play together, no problem. The professionalism is there. We'll be fine. All right, the platitudes are nice, but, we'll see what happens when the rubber truly meets the road. Because we all know how things like even the slightest bit of locker room discord can, upend a team in the playoffs. I agree with you, Rabbi. Houston is the wild card, X factor, whatever you want to call them. They are a dangerous team, and nobody should want to see them at any point in the playoffs. They can, with Westbrook and Harden. I said way back in October, I don't see how these guys can share the ball. Somehow they were managing to do it. Yeah, they're all in a small ball. Look, PJ Tucker can guard guys who are bigger than him. He's shown that throughout his career. Covington can lock down anybody on the perimeter. I saw him do it when he was a Sixer, and he can definitely be the Trevor Ariza. Back when Trevor was a Rocket. He's a pure 3-and-D guy. He can lock down anybody on the perimeter, and he's a pretty good knockdown three-point shooter, which is something Harden and Westbrook need to have at least one of playing alongside them. If they can get their act together and find a way to play together and share the ball and get everybody to buy in, yeah, they can wreck any one of those teams. They can wreck that team's playoff dream. It's going to be the West, as usual, is going to be fun to watch.
The Rock, it was interesting about the Rockets, and I agree with you, Jay. The wild card is that this restart has the feel of a summer league AAU feel to it, and it fits literally right into James Harden and Russell Westbrook.
Yep.
They play up the alleyway. They can play up tempo. They can play as fast as they want, as loose as they want, and they play small. Like Mike D'Antoni is finally just embraced it. Like, you know what? We're gonna play small. This is who we are. And we're gonna go down with the ship. Whether win or lose, and I like that from Mike D'Antoni. I bashed him in the past about his allergic reaction to coaching defense, but I like the fact that he's going to embrace the Rockets and give them their own kind of unique identity. They're going to play small, they're going to play fast, they're going to play quick, they're going to jack up a lot of threes, and that's who they're going to be. And this dynamic of this bubble and this environment kind of plays right into what they love to do to an extent. As far as the Nuggets, we talked about the role players playing well, but you know what? That was pre-COVID when they had to play actual role games. There's no crowd, there's no heckling that they have to worry about. That's what makes this thing so compelling. And the fact that a team that will fight for home court advantage, there is none. There's no crowd. You don't have to worry about the LED boys and the virtual crowds cheering and heckling you because they're not doing it face to face. So that allows young players on the Nuggets to actually play a little more looser and a little more freely. And I think that's a dangerous component to a team like the Clippers, who right now is going to need the 8 games to kind of get everything back in order as far as chemistry. Utah, you know what? The Utah Jazz is one that kind of going to catch my attention because you got to think about it. They are literally the team with patient zero on their roster that kind of kickstarted this whole domino effect as far as sports being suspended 4 months ago. And, yeah, the relationship between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert has changed considerably. I mean, nothing looks bad than seeing footage of Rudy Gobert touching equipment and touching microphones after a presser, and then you find out that he was not taking it seriously and goofing off in the locker room. He tests positive, and he unfortunately passed along to one of his teammates. That will really strain a relationship on a number of occasions, particularly a professional relationship. And now they have to kind of gel and go on in the locker room. Yeah, they said all the right things, but we don't know really how remorseful Rudy Gobert may be. He's obviously has said and done all the right things since that moment. We don't know how resentful Donovan Mitchell may be, because you got to think about this. We don't know the long-term effects of what this virus has on the human body. Mm-hmm. What if Donovan Mitchell can't play 35 minutes because there's a lingering respiratory problem? What if Gobert can't play for more than long stretches at a time? Those are a lot of question marks that are kind of up in the air with anybody that's tested positive that's going to be in this restart, and particularly with the Utah Jazz, with that dynamic. That is a big question mark that's going to hang over this team unless they can prove otherwise.
Well, one thing that'll be interesting enough, first of all, if you saw the highlights yesterday, Bol made his debut for the Nuggets. I'm interested to see if he can give Jokic maybe 5 to 10 minutes off and could play really well, at least blocking shots in the center. That'll be an interesting thing for me to see.
Your last name is Bowl. You can block shots.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a 7-2 freak. Also, you're going to see a lot of interesting matchups between – because the 3 to 6 seeding scenarios and the 2 to 6 seeding scenarios in the East and West respectively means these seeding games actually do mean a little something. They're not just glorified exhibitions. Scrimmages, then exhibitions, then playoffs. That's the way we go over here. This is going to be a very interesting 2 weeks before the actual playoffs begin. All right. We have one more segment tonight before we do predictions. And after the horrific events that happened in May with the death of George Floyd and the unrest that happened in the streets for weeks after, the NBA was the first to show their support to the Black Lives Matter movement. And while a handful of players were thinking of sitting out the restart to show the message to the cause will be shown in many ways on court. Players will be allowed to have what they want to say on the back of their jerseys instead of their name, and Black Lives Matter has been painted on the side of every court. The NBA has been at the forefront of civil reform, and it definitely looks like this restart will be no different. However, Jay, is the message enough?
Look, Rabbi, it's nice that, the NBA is giving the players the option of putting a Black Lives Matter type saying or a victim's name on the back of their jersey instead of their own last name, and having Black Lives Matter plastered all over the courts. It's a nice visual for all of us watching the games, but those are just subtle examples of continuing the social justice initiative, raising awareness on things like police brutality and systemic racism during the NBA's time in the bubble. What will have the most impact in keeping this train rolling will be the players continuing to talk about it at every opportunity. As Kawhi Leonard said, quote, "It doesn't matter if we have a statement on the back of our jersey, it's about doing the work." And some players are already doing the work. Jeremy Grant and Tobias Harris have both opted to use their Zoom media sessions to talk about the killing of Breonna Taylor, who was the first responder who was shot in her bed in her Louisville apartment after local police mistakenly broke into her apartment searching for someone else on a no-knock drug warrant. Grant said the NBA missed an opportunity when they limited the phrases and names that could be used on the back of jerseys. Now, I tend to agree with that. The players, I think, should have had more input. It's why a lot of them are keeping their names on the back of their jerseys. But as LeBron James said, he doesn't need anything on the back of his Laker jersey to get his message out there. Now, Grant says he will continue to use his press conferences to bring attention to important things like Breonna Taylor and Elijah McCain. I hope he does. I hope a lot of the players do. Look, I know that once the games start for real, the media is going to focus on the usual basketball stuff in the post-game interview sessions. So it's going to be on the players to strike the right balance between their basketball obligations to the media and keeping this messaging front and center, and I hope they're able to do that. The momentum that started before the bubble needs to continue while they're in it, and even more so once the season ends. Look, guys, we've said this before. We're at a pivotal point in history, and the platforms these athletes have to be a force for good, for real change in our society, need to be utilized to their maximum capacity. And if ever there was a league whose players are best positioned to do that, it's the NBA.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jay. One of the things I said when people was worried about if basketball will ultimately take over and kind of overshadow what has been going on the last couple of months. And I just said no, because you have players who have not participated or are not in the bubble who can still get the message across. I think the whole thing is keeping the conversation going. You think about Malcolm Brogdon, Damian Lillard, Solomon Hill, Donovan Mitchell, Sterling Brown, Alex Caruso. They have dedicated their time and talked about Breonna Taylor and bringing justice for her. Like, you think about this, and I brought this up. It's been 140 days since Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. Close to 120 days since Breonna Taylor was murdered. 46 days since George Floyd was murdered, which really kicked off a lot of this, the protesting and this whole conversation about social justice and equality. And racial discrimination and police brutality, which finally brought it to the forefront when there were no sports going on. It's been 30 days since Rashard Brooks was murdered. And you think about this, is that as time is going on, we're still wondering when is charges going to be made in the case of Breonna Taylor, or what's going to happen with Arbery and George Floyd and Rashard Brooks. You think about, if you go through the research, there have been so many instances of wrongful killings by police, but you really can't find many instances where there's been a conviction. And that's where the keeping the conversation in the spotlight is there for the players. You see the Black Lives Matters on the court, that's great. Wearing a decal like the NFL is going to allow, like, or the names on the back, that's great enough in itself. But it's the conversation, it's the talking, it's using the spotlight, it's using the platform. You have the world, you have ESPN and TNT, you have former players on each of those platforms who can talk about it. I watched there's a special that I watched a few weeks ago that the Undefeated actually featured and talked about what athletes were doing as far as getting the message shot across. You have your counterpart in the WNBA whose season starts this week that can get the message out. The conversation has to stay fresh. It has to be there. You see it on social media. You have to keep it going because you don't want, and ultimately basketball will be the primary thing we talk about. Has this restart go on, and especially with baseball and with football, has sports to continue. But it's the fact that, you know what, these players probably have more influence on the general population and the public opinion than politicians do. You know, we think about, we are so divided as a country as far as liberal or conservative and Democrat and Republican. We have gone away from respecting each other's opinion, right or wrong, and being able to figure out or get on the same page and realize something is wrong. And until we identify what's wrong, we can't fix it. You can't fix a problem if you don't recognize there's a problem in the first place. And being able to get that conversation going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, regardless of the platform, that is what's going to allow this to continue regardless of when basketball becomes the primary topic.
Well, you both said everything perfectly, so I'm just going to add some substance to this conversation and try to steer in about a different direction. One thing I just realized is you have to put the last name of your jersey back on. You can keep the social message, but after the first 4 games, your last name must be on your jersey again, or you can just go Jimmy Butler and just put no name on, as he's still trying to do. And I like some of the messages that you can put on there. There's 29 approved messages. I can't breathe, power to the people, justice now, say her name, si se puede, anti-racist, I am a man, speak up, how many more, mentor, education, reform, and so on and so on. I think this is a big thing for the NBA. We are in a different time in terms of COVID and in terms of social messaging. If you were to tell me that you were going to see Black Lives Matter on an MLB mound in 2020, I would not have believed you until just now. Mm-hmm. But one thing that is for sure, if you watch MLS and you see what they've been doing, they've been taking a knee after almost every single game, which means the president has immediately turned off the game right after it. We believe his tweet from yesterday. And also even the Philadelphia Union in their first game, they each put the name of somebody who has been wronged by police or has been racially discriminated against on their cleats. And it was a very powerful moment. And I'm sure we're going to see something to that extent, especially in the beginning of this bubble cycle. I think it'll turn more to sports as we go along. It's just a question of how much we keep that message going through the conference. And
Rabbi, I didn't realize that the thing.
I didn't realize it till now either.
I'll tell you what, though. I think once that happens, start looking down at their sneakers and see what messaging they start putting on those, because NBA players have never been shy about putting messaging on their sneakers.
Yeah, they can still put it, by the way, on their jerseys. They just have to put the last name under that message once we get to Game 5. So
also, worth mentioning, the Players Association and Russell Westbrook with agreement, for apparel to honor those who have been victims of police brutality as well. So that's another avenue that you may see the players use during this restart.
We'll see. And we have reached the point of this show as we did last week. Let's end tonight's show with the way we always do. Predictions 100% sure to go wrong. Burn the tape, burn the YouTube video. These never happened. So here are some soap opera questions for this week. Is the Greek Freaking Company going to break through the tape? Will LeBron make his 9th NBA Finals appearance in 10 seasons? We forget about that, especially what happened the season before. Or will Kawhi prove that board band still gets titles? Or is there someone else? Yay, let's start with you.
Well, I'm right off the bat. I'm gonna go with that someone else. I went back and forth with this leading up to the show, but for the East rep, I'm gonna go all in on the defending champs. The Bucks may have the best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo, but they're going to be missing 2 of their key players in their rotation for a little while the Raptors return all of their main rotation players, led by their big 3 of Siakam, Lowry, and Van Fleet, and a defense that gave this Bucks team fits in last year's playoffs. Look, I gave you all the numbers back in our East preview segment. I think their defense is still championship caliber, even minus Kawhi Leonard, and I think they can manufacture enough offense through various means to make their way back to the finals. For the West rep, I'm going to go a little chalk, and I'm going with the Lakers. But it's predicated on some ifs. If LeBron and AD can keep their level of play where it was prior to the stoppage, if Dion Waiters and J.R. Smith understand their roles, play within them, and avoid their tendency to give in to their worst instincts. If Kyle Kuzma can be that third guy consistently, especially for the minutes when LeBron sits, if Dwight Howard ceases to be a distraction with his off-court stuff, and if Frank Vogel can find a closing 5, then I like the Lakers' chances to give the King another ring.
So wait, if LeBron and AD are at their best, that's such a good if. If they're not at their best, then let's not pick the Lakers. What a chalk prediction there, Jay.
I said for the West, I'm going chalk. Come on.
But I just like the if LeBron and AD play at their best.
Hey.
I'm like, wait a minute, that's obvious.
UFC, nothing is guaranteed. This is 2020. I do not give 100% certainty to anything, sports or life.
For me, you know what? I'm going with Milwaukee coming out of the Eastern Conference. I picked them at the beginning of the season. I think last year's loss in the conference finals kind of still sticking with them a little bit because they won the first 2 games only to basically squander the next 4 games. And you think about even a series clincher, they led by double digits at one point. Yeah. And it was looked like they were on their way to force the game 7 and just had a complete second half meltdown. So I think Milwaukee's coming out of the East. The West, you know what? I'm going with LeBron and the Lakers. I mean, you think about this. This is the Lakers' first playoff appearance in 7 seasons. Well, it's just hard to believe, but you think about this. LeBron James has something to prove. Not necessarily winning another MVP. He has plenty of those. It's the fact that for 15 years, we have heard some of his biggest critics complain and talk about how he dominated the Eastern Conference. He can't do that to the Western Conference. Think about this. Before his injury, the Lakers were actually the 4th seed in the Western Conference on Christmas Day last season and blew out the defending champion Golden State Warriors at home before LeBron got hurt. There were only 2 games out of the 2 spot at that time. When he went down, so did the Lakers season because then the injury bug just completely wiped out the rest of the season. Now you think about it a year later, LeBron is fully healthy. He's 35. You gave him 4 extra months to basically heal up. He doesn't have the grind of the 82-game season to worry about. Anthony Davis is healthy. And you think about LeBron James, I would not bet against this man at all in the playoffs. He has proven one too many times that if you bet against him, he will turn the table and make you eat your words. We saw what he did in 2018, but I still say it's arguably his best postseason run, even though they didn't win a championship. But what he did in that Game 7 against Boston and leading that team, that Cavalier team, to a finals appearance, was probably the best performance of his career. So I'm going Bucks, Lakers in the finals, and I'm going with LeBron James and the Lakers to to shut up the critics about him not being able to win the Western Conference. They're going to win a championship, but they're going to win it for Kobe Bryant. Remember that. That is another added motivation.
Right. You know what?
That's an added motivation this season. Like, even before the suspension this season, it was literally, this one's for Kobe. We're going to win it for the Black Mamba. And I think that added motivation, and LeBron said it, there's not a day that goes by that he doesn't think about Kobe Bryant. You think about it, Kobe was the guy that embraced LeBron James as a Laker when he signed as a free agent. When the Lakers had their problems, Kobe Bryant was the one that came out and said that the Lakers would be fine, that LeBron would be fine, and the Lakers would be a prominent team again. And God rest his soul, he was right. And I think the Lakers will bring that championship, but it won't be for Lakerland. It would be for Kobe and Gigi Bryant.
You know what, Rabbi? Since if we're going to go ahead and pick winners, I'm going to ride Anthony's coattails and give say it's the Lakers to lift the Obi for all of those reasons.
If we get to October. Anyway, one thing I want to mention back to the previous segment before, in a preseason scrimmage tonight, LeBron James wrote "Justice for Brianna T" on his sneakers. So you know he is already making his message without having to put it on the back of his jersey. Okay. Nice job, Chalk Boys. Now I'm going to give you two out of the blue predictions. In the East, Anthony just mentioned this team, and it's the team that is, again, that kind of team. And yes, I'm bashing Kyrie Irving because there ain't no Kyrie Irving on this team, and this team will gel together. And I think Kemba will get his magic. I'm going with the Boston Celtics in the East.
Ooh.
I'm going with the Boston Celtics in the East. I think they have nothing to lose, and I think that I like them against Toronto, and against Milwaukee. I think it's anybody's game, especially without a home court advantage. I think Boston comes out of the East, and I like the Clippers in the West.
All right.
Kawhi Leonard is going to go on a different level in the postseason, and Paul George has had a ton of, you know what, I'm just going to say it, shit postseason appearances, and I think it's time for him to have a breakout one. I think once the core comes back, and I can see the core coming back after the seeding games, or even after the first round, if the Clippers match well with Dallas, that's who they're predicted to play, then I think they'll get their full team back. I think I like the Clippers in the West, and I like the Clippers and Boardman to get back-to-back titles. Kawhi Leonard is Thanos, and Thanos needs to continue to reign on the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Going to be a very interesting bubble restart, which again starts 1 week from tonight.
Yep.
That does it for another edition of OTSL. Thank you for watching us tonight. We are live every Thursday on, and I'm going to say it correctly and not misspell it like I've done most times today on Instagram stories, facebook.com/onthesportslines. And if you want to see our Zooming later in the week, you go to youtube.com/onthesportslines, where you'll get this nice, beautiful show all packaged up. And Jay?
You can follow us on Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, and the link to the show when it goes up on YouTube can be found there.
Next week, we finally will finish our tour of the Big Four sports by talking NFL training camps, and we'll preview the NHL returns of the Islanders and the Rangers, led by MVP candidate Artemi Panarin. Congratulations on getting yourself an MVP nod. So again, for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Stay safe all, and God forbid, let's hope sports is back for the long haul. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.